here.
out
We're
there.
right there.
Serious looking crowd. Is Monica coming in remotely from Paris? No commitment.
I am sure she deserves a vacation.
Call to order the October 1st meeting of the North Andover Planning Board. We're going to start in executive session tonight. We will come back into our regular meeting. We are going to be discussing an executive session. It's Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Reason Number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, Varsity Wireless versus North Andover Planning Board. The chair finds that having a discussion in open session would be detrimental to the town's litigation position. So I would ask someone to make a motion to enter executive session for that purpose.
I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session.
Get a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Perfect
Roll
timing.
call. Roll.
Got time, it's going to executive session.
Didn't miss a beat.
It's like
Aaron Preston, vote to go to executive session.
I also vote to go into executive session.
Vote to go into executive session.
Kate Barnese, vote to go into
All right,
executive
we're going to
session.
executive session. We're going to ask everyone to step out. I assume this will take about 10 to 20 minutes, and we'll let everybody back in when we're done. Thank you. Session, or not out of executive session, back in open session. A&R 68 Highland View Avenue. Come on up. Why don't you come up to the podium here?
Podium
Or
or-
the stand. And are you Helene Ryan?
Yes, I am.
All right, so we have a request for endorsement of the approval not required plan. The applicant proposes to dissolve a lot line.
So my map is up on the screen right now. 68 Highland is highlighted in the green box. Just south of that parcel is an additional parcel owned by this applicant. So she's looking to remove a lot line, combine these two lots in the A&R plan.
So is the form of the application correct? Because I don't see the Form A. Okay.
So delete the lot line is
Okay.
noted.
That's all.
Okay. And
Looks like we have
the signature
180
block is there.
180 feet of frontage.
Yep.
Okay, no issues with access.
So the lot combined will be 135 feet of frontage, Aton.
Okay, and, yep, I see that.
It meets the lot area.
Okay, and the lot is otherwise conforming?
Yep.
Okay,
Any discussion on what the purpose is?
It's actually-
can if you want to, it probably
Good
doesn't
thing.
matter, but,
It's a good thing.
yeah.
because It precludes the ability to have a substandard sized lot. So anytime we do this, it's a very positive thing. Yeah.
Yeah, usually it's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So it meets the
So
legal requirements.
I would make a motion to direct the planner to sign off on the Form A for this
Do we
166
do-
Highland Avenue.
Do we do planner and/or associate planner? Is it just for better practice, just so in case you're not here?
You can do either, but both of our signatures are at the Registry of Deeds as
Right.
being designates of the board to sign on your behalf.
So, right, but if, it just,
Appropriate authority of the planning office.
okay, yeah, I just wanna make
That's
sure that, just in case, what our motion should be going forward, so that the planner, the assistant planner, or designated authority can sign the plan.
I'll second his motion.
Okay? All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Thank you.
Now, what's my next step? Do I bring the Mylar
To me,
to you?
tomorrow, yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
bring it to Jean, she'll stamp it, and then you go file it with the registry.
So
I
we'll
believe.
stamp your application back into the clerk's office as being approved. At that time, you'll get the Mylar. You can bring that to the Registry of Deeds to have it recorded, and then you'll bring back 2 copies to us. We'll get one to the assessor's office, so you're taxed on 1 parcel.
So I'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. 21 High Street, RCG LLC, from the RCG seats. Request for a 1-year permit extension of site plan review, special permit plan development district, special permit and parking special permit approved to January 17th, 2018. Approved on January 17th, 2018. Okay, that makes more sense. Hi.
Hi. So this is for our new building on the East Mill, the 51 units. We were delayed due to some national grid issues. We had to move some poles out of the way, which took us longer than we thought and pushed us out of one construction season. We were able to do phase 1, which is the site improvements that went along with the project. We repaved and put the whole parking lot back together and did some plantings, but we weren't able to break ground. So we know we won't break ground by January, which is when our permit expires. So we were asking for a 1-year extension of that PDD permit.
Any questions, comments?
I think it's fine.
All right, so we get a motion to approve.
Anything we need to know by way of background?
If you vote to approve this, I'll just document it in a memo to the file and provide the applicant a memo.
So make a motion to grant the 1-year extension.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Do you guys want to take our other item while we're up here, or do you guys want to stay in order?
That's what the West Mill, the barber shop?
Yes, and the subdivision.
We're not gonna do the subdivision right now,
Okay,
so.
that's fine.
Yeah, why
We'll
don't
come
we-
back.
Yeah, come on back, we're gonna go through a couple of these
Go right back.
discussion items.
Who was the second on that motion? Peter? And it was 5-0, right? All right. 1, and that's it, they're stapled.
1210 Osgood Street, Princeton Developments LLC.
Yep, so Princeton was here at the last meeting requesting an insubstantial change in order to have COs issued by building. You asked that I draft that and formalize it in a decision, so the decision is being handed out now.
In 43D, is that correct to say otherwise approved by a town board? Does that mean any town board?
The zoning board can approve variances to signs, so
What's that?
the zoning board could receive an application for a variance for a sign, if you want me to specify
Well,
zoning.
that's otherwise by approved, I guess, by
Authorized town
an
board?
appropriate or authorized town board.
Guess it's kind of picky. And remind me if the light in the road, that'll all be done before a building is opened?
It's expected to be, so they typically flash for 2 weeks. It's been more than 2 weeks now.
Because I wonder if that's a condition, to say, okay, you can do it building by building, but the lights have got to be working first.
Well, the lights, isn't that typically, like, the lights are in our decision, right?
Yes.
I mean, that they have to put the lights in.
There's-
But, yeah, that's my point, is that
So which,
you wouldn't grant the certificate of occupancy unless there was satisfactory.
are we talking about
lighting,
traffic
right?
lights or?
He's talking
No,
about
he's
the
about the
traffic
traffic
light.
light on the
Oh,
the
the
Mass
traffic
Mass
light.
Yes.
DOT's putting a new
Okay.
traffic light at that intersection.
Yeah.
Um,
For public safety, doing this was premised on that, right? I know it's a
Well,
lower
certainly
volume.
from that.
So there is a condition that they have to comply with everything shown on that plan at the time they got permitting. And so the Mass DOT has approved all of those to be installed. As you can see, it's installed, it's just flashing. The items specific here are items listed prior to a CO. So the light is not listed because it wasn't a condition prior to the CO in the permit.
So it wouldn't, so the issue is it wouldn't be, if they had everything ready right now,
Yeah.
and that traffic light wasn't there, they could still go in, do the whole building. It just wasn't part of the decision originally, so that you have to have the traffic light before a certificate of occupancy.
Well, if it's blinking,
Yeah.
why don't they put it on?
It's all associated with the MassWorks grant money that's being spent along Route 125. So I don't know specifically, I know that I was told it was supposed to blink for 2 weeks, and it's been more than 2 weeks, so.
Is that just part of a phase-in, so people know, oh, there's a light?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels to me, let's solve the problem and put the light in. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but, I mean, to hold them up just because the state's being silly.
Did the,
It just strikes me that it's potentially a public safety issue if the light's there to accommodate this
It-
new traffic flow,
but
and then,
To trigger the warrant, they had to have 192 units plus the commercial development. That's what allowed for the light. It wasn't occupying 44 units in one building.
fair point.
I agree with you in terms of, it would obviously be more safer if that was working, but one building would not have triggered a
Good point.
traffic light.
All right,
and
thank you.
what did we do with the conservation type conditions? you put in anything?
Yep,
for-
they're in there, what we discussed last time in terms
Okay.
of the intercepted groundwater. It's no longer called intercepted, it's groundwater or stormwater, is
Yeah.
how we worded it.
Where is it? Oh, I see, just where is it? Could you just bring it to?
The third to last paragraph, all avenues for potential human contact with groundwater, stormwater, or treatment system components that collect,
Oh,
transport,
okay,
or
on the
hold surface.
conditions, okay, got it. Okay, great.
On condition 78, 79B, there's a statement or a phrase, first 3 residential buildings. Do we know what those buildings are? Do we have a plan that
Yeah.
denotes?
There's a phasing plan that you saw at the last meeting, and so I'd be guessing which one is A, B, C, or D, but the 2 rear ones are the first 2, and then the one closest to the clubhouse. The last building to be brought online is, if you're looking, the front right, if you're looking
So
for the
do we
front.
have a reference to that phasing plan?
I can add a reference to that, and I can attach them as an attachment. to
Yeah.
this.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Okay, so can we get a motion to approve as amended?
I'll make a motion to approve as amended the request for an insubstantial change for 1210 Osgood Street.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, approved. 247 Chickering Road, Enterprise Bank, request for an insubstantial change to allow for demolition and possible foundation installation prior to notice of decision, condition number 37 being satisfied.
Pass the whole packet. Whole packet, keep passing, pass the whole packet. Pass the whole packet. There we go.
Okay,
Well done.
Thank you.
hello. Welcome back. All right, what can we do for you folks? Well, why don't you tell us who you are and what we're doing?
So we received our approvals, and we've been going through the process with Mass DOT.
What's your name?
I'm sorry, Luke Bouchard, Enterprise Bank.
Okay.
Going through the process with DOT, and we have submitted a letter from our traffic consultants, MDM, to summarize our position with DOT at this time. However, the process is going to take us, we believe right now, optimistically in January. So we were hoping to be granted the right to proceed with removing the existing building at 247, the former Bulgers building, and ideally put in foundations prior to winter so that we can continue the process. Right now, our decision is that we cannot proceed with any building permits or demolition permits until we have received all state DOT approvals. We feel very strongly that we are going to get the approvals that we have requested. We've met twice with DOT to discuss the project, and they're aware of our plans, our designs, and the hardships involved with tying into the state system, which is, of course, the biggest issue that DOT would have. And we feel that we're optimistically going to get those, so we felt that we should at least ask the question to the board and see if we can proceed and keep the project moving along. You know, if we don't, you know, we're off into the spring and sort of just delayed, so.
So, Ken, why is it taking them so long to render a decision?
There's,
For the record, David Jordan with Greenman Peterson, formerly MHF Design, civil engineer. The traffic consultant is preparing the final permit applications, both for the driveway and for the utility connections. As Luke said, we've had a couple pre-application meetings with DOT. They have been very positive. They were aware of what we're asking for, and they're aware of how we're addressing their concerns, particularly with the drainage tie-in. And so we are, as I said, the traffic consultant's finishing up those applications. I expect to submit those either later this week or next week. Once submitted, the process with DOT usually runs about 90 days. So even though they've already heard what we're proposing, they haven't raised any serious objections up to this point. It just has to go through the normal review process at DOT and just takes time.
Any commentary on the curb cuts that are proposed for the facility?
No, I mean, as you know, there were two there for the Bulger's Animal Hospital facility. There's 2 with our proposal. The main thing that we have been coordinating with them is tying these driveways into their new project there on Route 125. So we've already, we're working with, again, with DOT and their design team to, make sure that their new plan ties in with our new curb cut. So there's been some adjustments to their design plans to accommodate us. So they know we're coming, they're aware of our timing, and we've even had some initial discussions with them and their contractor about the drainage work that is going to be done in Route 125, and when that'll be in place so that, it'll be there when we need to tie into it.
In worst case, if they don't have the approval to tie into the drainage plan, they'd have to come back and modify their special permit.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed to me that what you're saying is you're willing to take the risk
Yeah.
that something could go awry here. I mean, frankly, tearing down the building's probably a good thing at this point. And then putting up the foundation incurs a little bit extra cost that if something went drastically wrong, it might cause you a problem. But if you're willing to take that risk and you're not going to go any further than that.
That's our plan, is we just want to be able to beat the winter conditions as far as concrete's concerned, and we feel that by the time we get to that point, we're either going to have more information from DOT and be able to speak further to the project, or, we'll have have the permits in hand. So it's just a matter of construction sequencing and trying to, do things the right way sometimes.
And I drafted the decision for only a demolition permit and only a foundation permit, so not the building.
Okay. So, we get a motion to approve.
Would there need to be any provision for a bond in case something goes really bad and the site has to be straightened out?
We already have a bond, don't we?
I believe it's $20,000 for the original site plan review.
Oh, do you have that bond?
It doesn't get filed, that's a good point. It doesn't get filed until pulling a building permit, and therefore, you should condition that it gets filed prior to a
Prior to.
demolition permit. Yes.
Good.
And it is 20,000, right? Am I right?
It's 10 and 10.
Yeah.
10 for conservation and 10 for town board.
All right, so that bond will be before a demolition permit, correct?
Yeah,
Otherwise,
so it is 10 with us and 10 conservation.
Okay, so can we get a motion to approve the insubstantial change with the, as amended with a $10,000 bond moving from prior to CO to prior to demolition permit and/or CO, I mean, they don't pull the permit, so just wanted to be either.
So it would be prior to the demo permit being pulled.
Right, but also, if for some reason they decide not to pull that, it should still be before a CO as well. See what I'm
I
saying?
mean, before building.
Right.
Building.
Right, right. Before building
Demolition
Right,
and
before
or
building.
building permit.
Yeah.
Demolition and/or, yeah. That's what I
Whatever
meant.
the language.
That's why you sit here. All right, great. Good catch, everybody. Can we get a second?
Second.
Second over there. All in favor?
All right.
Okay,
I'll take that personally.
spreading the wealth. Okay, great. Moving right along. Okay, so we are going to discuss the draft accessory dwelling unit and inclusionary zoning bylaw. So Jean's been doing most of the work, been doing a little bit of help to try to move along some of these bylaws. So for those of you who haven't been on the board, we've been talking a little bit in the past about how to do appropriate planning for increased housing needs and affordable housing. As most of you all know, our housing quotient for affordable housing is below the 10%. As of the last check, it was at 8.5%, and that's before some of these permitted constructions. So we'll probably go below 8, some 7.5, 7, somewhere in a very scary range.
I forecasted around 7.5 if everything were to go through.
So some ways that we can, so that's one issue, and the issue there being we want to, one, have more affordable housing, that's the most important part, and two, be able to have some controls about our affordable housing, whereas with the 40B project, we have very little controls. The accessory dwelling unit, I think, also ties into that of just wanting to have more housing choices for people, and so encouraging the ability for people to stay in, say, their home if they're downsizing, want to sell their, have more family moving in together and things like that, or having more shared housing for people who want to potentially stay in their home and either can't afford it or need additional income, or we don't have to build additional units. That's what we're doing. Do you guys want to just see, there are people outside, I just want to make sure everyone knows the executive session.
The ZBA meeting's at the school administration building,
Ah,
so in case they're
okay.
looking for them.
So if anybody's looking to come in here, we are in open session. We're waiting. Okay, so we are open. Okay, all right. Making sure. We are on accessory dwelling. Yep. Okay, so, anybody want to tackle anything in particular, or have any, just general
One
thoughts?
observation that I would make of this stuff is that this has got to be socialized very extensively, because the one thing that struck me, really just hit me between the eyeballs with all the apartments that we have in town, is a lot of people are very concerned about the character of the community changing because we're shifting from single-family housing to more to multifamily housing. And both of these take that in that same direction. And, I'm at the point where I'm not sure I sit on some of this sort of stuff, and if we roll forward with this could potentially blow up, big time, I think, because there's an awful lot of people that are really concerned and potentially would object to this. And I know anytime in the past where we've ever done anything like this, like some of the things we've done in R4 about adding additional units and stuff, have gotten an enormous amount of visibility. A lot of people will not like this. I guarantee a lot of people will not like this. I'm not even sure I like it, to tell you the truth. But I think a lot of people are going to have problems with
So
this.
which part, and I think that's a great point. I think one, getting it right? So figuring out what we want to do and why, that's like priority one. And then two, kind of the messaging behind it. So I guess I do want to hear what people think your own concerns are and what you think the community overall concerns are. Now, I think we will definitely get people that say, I don't want any more apartments. That sentiment is out there. But in terms of this, the inclusionary zoning is about making percentages of those things that are built, multifamilies that are built, or larger subdivisions, affordable. So it doesn't really add more units. It just makes some of them affordable.
But I disagree. If I was playing around with the math in my head earlier, and if the goal of the inclusionary zoning bylaw, if it were passed, if it's to get to that 10% threshold, and within the bylaw we're mandating 15% of new units that come online have to be affordable, you gotta build a lot of units to get up to that 10%, especially if we're dealing with in the 7.5 range. So you're talking about having to build like 3,000 units to
So-
get from 7.5 up to.
Inclusionary zoning is not designed to get you to that number, but if it were in place and we were to get to that number, it's a maintenance tool. It's
Yeah,
very helpful
yeah.
in maintenance.
But
I did not handle inclusionary, so I didn't know you were gonna discuss them both at the same time.
Okay.
So I
So
handed out
this is just accessory.
Oh.
In order to keep
Which do you guys, well, we can do one at a time. Which do you want to, what do you want to do first? Why don't we do the
John,
accessory?
can I just follow?
Yeah, no, go.
Um,
This is a discussion.
Can you just, are you able to elaborate a little bit on what you think the concerns are, or would?
Well, again, I haven't seen the other
So-
one, and I think there's, so I'm starting with the premise that we have had an historical mix of housing in the community. between single-family and multifamily. And what's interesting, because I was talking to some people recently, and they were talking, and I'm probably not gonna get this completely right, because it was before my time, it's probably before your time too, Peter, in town, but we had probably 40 years ago, 45 years ago, a similar surge in multifamily. There was basically, if you go back to, right, and Gina, you would know
Early
this.
70s, late 60s.
Right, the
yeah.
late 60s, early 70s, there was none. And then all of a sudden, there was an explosion of it. And then the town put some limits, some severe constraints on it then, because they were concerned about changing the character of the community. And then you roll into the 80s, and there was a single-family boom, and the town put some limits on even single-family, because it's a problem. We're now going to a situation where it's more likely that there's going to be multifamily housing in the future than single family. I mean, you know, frankly, from normal single family, with the exception of the two large farms, there's probably room for another 400 or 500 houses, period. You can't get any more. But a lot of people are concerned, for a lot of reasons, good and bad and indifferent, that the character of the community is changing when you go from single family to multifamily. It's the ownership, it's the longevity, and then it's all the school thing and the traffic things and so forth. I think at some level, some switch to multifamily is inevitable. It's just, for a lot of different reasons, it's the case. But what I worry about is you layer on the accessory bylaw, and the way I read it is that you take every single family house and you could add an apartment to every single one of those. That changes a lot. I think a lot of people will object to that.
Suite in the same cases would pretty
Yeah,
much.
but a family suite's different than an apartment.
It is different, and it's specific people and whatnot. So this broadens the housing choice, certainly, but the control of family suites, so what we've ended up with, in my opinion, is there's a lot of accessory dwelling units that used to be family suites, and it's the control of that.
No, that is true, but that's a different issue. But, so do we double down by making more of them, or controlling what we already have? What I'm, you know, because people are gonna say, I live on this street, and I don't want my street to be condoized. I don't wanna have multifamily people living on my street. I'm sorry, I just don't want that. And I think most people live in single-family houses. They will not want that.
Right, so I think that will likely be the instinct, right? And so I think, but to me, it's a really good bylaw. One, we already have the family suite bylaw, so we're just changing that. So it's not like we're creating something new. And so for you guys to know, the family suite bylaw allows you basically to have an in-law apartment, okay?
So,
But it has
just
to
to
be-
clarify that
Yeah.
difference, a family suite is, it seems like the accessory dwelling is essentially, it's for lack of a better term, condo apartment, fully functional within the confines of an existing single-family home.
Or
A family
detached,
suite,
potentially. But-
where a family suite maybe doesn't have all the amenities that would
No.
make it a stand,
No.
So what,
It has
so
all,
what
it has
is,
you have to be related,
you
right?
have to be related.
It has, right, so if you want to do a family suite, it has to be your parents or in-laws or something like that. This would open it up to anyone. It doesn't,
It requires the primary household to reside in the primary house, and the accessory dwelling unit is for the in-law.
Is the occupant of the accessory dwelling unit specifically named and tied to the permit?
currently, or,
I guess
currently,
both.
yes.
Yes.
And in this, yes, but you could, the owner could live in either. So like, say I want my kids, or if I want to let someone else live in my house and I want to downsize, instead of moving to a new condo, I could just build something on the side of my house and live there, and somebody else could live in my main portion. I could rent that out. You could do that.
Is there any condition when the purpose of that unit for the family member ceases to be?
Not in the
Needed.
accessory dwelling, in the current family, there is. In the
Okay.
current bylaw, if your then in-law dies or moves out or whatever, you're supposed to like
Revert
rip it
back.
out and take out the kitchen and you
Right.
can't use it.
So how does that work under the new proposed?
You can keep it.
So it's a rental property, basically is what it becomes. The accessory dwelling, it's a type of rental property in your home. I have more space than I need. let me build a kitchen and a dining room, all those things, and then I can earn rent.
Right.
So, and the primary resident has to notarize that they're living in one of the 2 units.
Right.
So the 2 cannot be rented.
Right, you can't
It
rent
has to
out
be
as a
owner
duplex.
occupied.
It has to be owner occupied.
So, John, to your,
Is the idea.
helpful for me to hear this, to your earlier points, I think you're right, that people could object to the notion that every house can be a 2-unit house. But at least my understanding of accessory bylaws elsewhere were that not every house could meet the criteria. And at least from my impression, it was actually limiting. Now, that depends on what the criteria are, but, changing the character of the house so you can't tell that it's not a one-family house from the front. Some designs of house make it very difficult to do that. Still having 2 separate exits for the accessory without that essentially being visible. The ratios of space, again, depending on,
So those are things that
so
are
the
in here to
details
discuss,
of the
right.
criteria, at least when I moved away from North Andover, lived in many, many towns from Maine to New Orleans and points in between. And in one of those towns, an accessory bylaw went in place just as we moved in. And we were, what's this? But at least for the period of time we were there, it became apparent, at least to me, that given the criteria in that town, it wasn't easy to make a house into an accessory. It was actually limiting. Now, some houses, based on the design, yes, but it did not mean, in theory, every house could be a
Well, again,
2-unit.
I don't know what the explicit criteria are. I was sort of just skimming it. I was under the presumption that it would be a fairly low bar to meet.
So those are the things.
That may be something that is really critical, whether it's a low bar or a high bar.
Right, so that, I think, I don't think we need to super go into that tonight. I think
Yeah.
that's something we come back and look at, but we did put in, has to do with a maximum square footage, right? So I think what do we have in there? Is it
850 for
850
maximum.
square feet is the maximum.
Or
square footage?
potentially a % of the gross floor area
Right,
of the
or
existing
potentially
house.
both floor. It has to meet all setback requirements still of the property that's on, so you can't get variances for it, right?
You can limit the bedrooms, you can limit the
limit-
number
right.
of occupants.
There are ways to limit it.
I mean,
The
the one
detached versus not
thing that I've
detached.
seen that's similar, it's not exactly the same thing, but it's similar, is that the R4 district has a provision that you can go two-family.
Right.
It used to be that the rules were very loose and very open-ended and abused for any number of reasons, and they were tightened up. But I tell you, people in most downtown residential neighborhoods didn't want two-family at all. I mean, so I'm just saying that, and these were cases because they didn't want, now again, the size and the scale, because you would double the size in some cases of the property, that's the case. But I think you're gonna get a similar reaction here unless you have something that's very carefully crafted.
So, yes, I think the messaging is going to be important
I
as well.
agree, but we recently in R4 had a case where a very large addition was put on, and it wasn't a family suite because they didn't put a connecting door up. So the mother wanted to move into that, have her family come live with her. So, and there was, once the abutters found out about it, yes, they were very upset about it. But we just did the master plan, we just did the housing plan, and there was a large sentiment for, I want to downsize, I can't find another house here. They were supportive of ADUs and having their families come live with them. To a degree, I understand.
I know, but, and then there was another contingent
Yep.
of people that were crazy. didn't
Housing
have a
was by
single
far the-
apartment in town. I mean,
Yep.
so. there
No,
really
I
was
agree.
a
Can you say
difference.
you don't
Yeah.
want ADUs and you don't want apartments? Like, there's
I
got to be
mean, it
some
was-
housing somewhere.
Yeah, obviously, there's a certain amount of cognitive dissonance
Right.
that goes on there.
Yep.
I want this, I want that, or,
Yep.
so I don't mean there's intellectual consistency here,
Fair
but,
enough.
Right.
in some cases, there legitimately
Yeah,
is.
but
I
there were,
mean,
these were both in the 2000 master plan, and the current, and the last housing plan, and the current housing plan. I mean, and I agree, the housing by far, it was polar opposite opinions, really, really strong, very few were in the middle. But I think it deserves a conversation, and that's, I think we're at that point.
Attached accessory dwelling unit on a property. I think there's one thing to say that you're gonna have a sort of disguised
Yeah.
apartment for an in-law to live within the confines of a house, but where you start getting new construction where there's all of a sudden this 850 square foot tiny house in the backyard.
Right, so that's.
I think that changes the landscape of.
Definitely up for, this is a draft, nothing is set in stone, so like, we talked about that, like, what if you had a garage or a shed and you wanted to convert that, like, if it was already there versus new construction? Or, so things along that, or do you not allow detached at all, you know, something like that. Those are all up for discussion. I think we wanted to kind of just present it as these are ideas in a base. And so I think the first step is this a path we want to travel? And that should be like our first decision. Do we want to go forward with some type of bylaw if we, you know, and then trying to craft them, so.
I'm not sure I love the new version compared to what's existing.
In the family
Because,
suite.
right, because if the whole purpose of what you're hearing is that people want to stay in town, want their families to live with them, why are we worried about converting it to rental housing when that use?
Well, because
doesn't
not
ex-
always your family, so like Gene said, like, you want to downsize, but you can't afford necessarily a condo. So you're gonna live in either the smaller one or you're gonna rent one out, you know? It's allowing people to potentially stay in their homes instead of moving out or something like that where they can't afford to do it. It also allows for, the family suite one is just very restrictive and people don't wanna do it because if that situation ends, then you have to rip it out and it's not worth it. I think we've had, what, like 15 in the last 4 or 5 years? Like, people just don't do them.
Is there a way to adapt if the demand is there around the family suite, is there a way to adapt the family suite?
Well, that's what
To
we're
allow-
doing.
yeah,
That's
we-
what we're doing. That's what this is. I mean, it's just opening it up to not families, you know? I had said to Gina, and I gotta figure out the language that I want, you know, I wanna make sure that it's not used for short-term rentals, you know, it's not Airbnb, that's not the purpose of it. But at least for me personally, if someone wants to add something small to their house and it meets with all the setbacks, I mean, what's the difference between building a small garage or a shed that you could do and building an apartment? As long as it meets all the setbacks and has the right parking and all of that, it's a way to meet, and I don't think it's gonna be used very much, to be honest, but I think it encourages, I think for the people that will use it, it's an important tool. So, could you give us some more, maybe is there some more planning data or conference or stuff about accessory units, about why this might be something we wanna, you know, some literature on why this might
Plenty
be
of
something we wanna,
literature,
yeah.
Is it possible to have some type of a baseline with, here are some other towns with, I don't know, sort of similar size and mix of rural and
Give you
not?
their accessory dwelling unit bylaw?
Yeah, and if there's any indication of, did it work? Did it have unintended effects? What were they? I don't know if that's available.
It's been a few years, but I sat on the Andover zoning board and we heard these frequently, but it was always a specific occupant tied to the permit. When it ceased to be in use, when the person died or moved out, the kitchen facilities were removed and it
Yeah,
became back part of the home. There was never an option as far as I know.
See, but to me, that just seems so draconian. It's like, if you're gonna allow it and it's gonna be there and someone's gonna live there, why does it matter who it is? Like, to the neighbor, like, to the abutter, why does it matter who it is? It's a person living there. If we can help people to use their property better and it's not affecting their neighbors, I guess I just struggled with those family ones, because I've seen it other places, and either people lie about who's using it, or they don't tell you when they move out, or they don't take out the kitchen. It's just so abused to make it either not worthwhile or draconian that you actually have to rip out your kitchen. It just seemed heavy-handed to
Do
me.
you know what their enforcement mechanism was to ensure that they ripped it out? No.
so, I mean, I'm really just trying to understand.
Yeah.
And I've
Oh, I
had some
agree.
experience, but,
And the permit had to be revisited, I think it was every 5 years,
Hmm,
to confirm that that occupant was still.
right.
Do we do anything for our family suites? No? No.
I don't think so.
I believe there's supposed to be inspection once a year, but I don't think we can execute to that.
But one of the things that, just trying to explore it a little bit, to the point of if it doesn't affect the neighborhood or the neighbors, what's the difference? I'm just sort of visualizing, in some parts of New England, you can drive through a part of a town where you say, wow, these, were grand houses years ago, and, they're very clearly multifamily.
Yep.
You can see
Yep.
the meters,
Yep.
and I'm not sure it's the case that when you turn a single-family house into, a rental, a partial rental, multifamily with an accessory that is a rental, at least if you use those examples of places around New England where older houses have been turned into, they're no longer single-family houses. I think you can at least find a lot of examples where it does change the character.
So.
In part because
Yep.
it's no longer majority single owner, and so there's,
But but for family suite versus accessory, that wouldn't matter. Like, who's living there doesn't affect that. It's just the fact of it, the existence of it, right?
I,
Like, right now, if you're in a residential district, and
Right.
you have an in-law,
it's
literally.
not a rental.
I guess,
it's
but it
still
still
high
looks the
family.
same if you're driving by.
I'm not so sure, because
Why
isn't
would
the
it?
family one is not necessarily disconnected in terms of separate entrances and separate
Yeah, no,
exits?
right, so, well, you can, but I'm saying you can, part of the bylaw can be that all the, like, this one has all the entrance has to be in the back or the side.
Mhm.
You can make it connected versus not connected. You
Right.
can condition
Right.
all of that. I think, so that's question one, is there a comfort level with how it would look versus how it looks now? And then question two is who can occupy it? I guess my point is, like, I don't care who occupies it. If you get the first part right, to me, you're adding more housing. That's what we need. We need more housing. It's either gonna be multifamily, like John said, there aren't very many single-family left. So if we can add housing in a discrete way that will help people, to me, I'm for it. Because the other options are just building more multifamilies.
Well,
If
I
you can do it
think
right.
For both of these,
Right.
they're trying to address an issue, a problem that has already been brought up, master plan process with the accessory dwelling unit. It's, I think it's worthy of exploring. Maybe we come to find it's not the right solution for adding housing to North Andover, but it's an option, and I think there's general consensus that, that more housing is needed. There is a demand for more housing, and there's a demand for housing that is a bit more affordable for some of the population, and
I would assume these would go for, if you made them rentals, they would be cheaper than, I would assume, market rate rentals, but I don't know that. I don't know if there's any,
well, I'd
information,
say
literature on
just
that. I would
based on
think so.
the size of
the size
it.
and, right, and the proximity, I would assume so, but I really don't know the answer to that. I don't know if there's any information.
But
on that.
just basic supply demand, if you put more of these smaller units on the market, that just
Right.
the rental market, pricing, so I don't know if it's the right option, but I think it's worthy of continued discussion, and specifically, having the public weigh in, even if they're quite irate about it.
So, definitely gonna be.
So I think what we should do as a next step, I don't think we should just dismiss it outright. I think we have how many more months till town meeting? I think this is the perfect time to bring this up, where there's still a lot of time for consideration. Just coming forth with stating a clear goal for why we're even looking at this, and then a timeline so the public knows what the steps we're gonna take to review this and craft this, or when all said and done, maybe just dismiss it at the end of the day.
Okay, I like that. So I think for our next step, maybe next session could be like informational about accessory dwelling unit bylaws, inclusionary housing bylaws. One, just like if there's any literature out there about why towns are going to do this. I'm sure the planning associations have plenty on that. And then similar cities and towns that may have them, just some examples that we could look at. And we could kind of, everyone just kind of maybe look through these, things you like, things you really don't like, and we can start kind of moving them forward. And then I think after that, yeah, maybe I like Aaron's idea of kind of mapping out a timeline for getting input. Stakeholders who make housing would be helpful, especially on the inclusionary zoning, but if you guys have any thoughts about the accessory dwelling as well, and reaching out to other
Yep.
developers on that to get their input.
So I agree with John, right at the beginning says we need a ton of public input,
Yep.
and we do. I would just hope that
We need to be a little further along.
we, yeah,
with what
that
we're
your sense is
proposing.
incorporated here before we get to that point, but, and that's why definitely starting it this early, because,
I think just, yeah, framing, explaining the why for both of them, with the inclusionary zoning, we are under that 10% threshold. We'd like to be at or a little bit above it, just to control our own destiny, so to speak. But I know there's a lot of concerns with the public about going forth with such a bylaw. I think we've heard it in the past couple of meetings with the various apartment complexes that have come up, the multifamilies, that there's just general resistance to market rate. But I think the prospect of 40Bs also is top of mind with everyone, and so I think that's the way we have to frame it, is that we see this problem. This is one way we think we can tackle it, but get it out in the public and see if there's any way to find a happy medium, or maybe a different solution that helps us get there.
Okay, great. Okay, so we'll continue that discussion. Okay, so let's go to our continued public hearings. 4 High Street, RCG West Mill, NA LLC, application for a modification of a sub-district A definitive master plan, looking for the use of a barber shop to be added.
So we were here the last meeting. We're looking to add this personal services use on our retail section at the mill. This currently is not allowed in the sub-district A. It was allowed in the PDD, which we do have some personal services over at the East Mill. It's allowed in General Business District, which is right across the street on our Elm Street property, and actually right at the edge of this one. And so we would like to allow this business to move in. So I think you guys, we had a decision. I know we reviewed it. Didn't have any comments.
Okay, any questions or comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? Would someone like to make a motion to close the public hearing as to the Sub-District A definitive master plan special permit modification for 4 High Street, RCG West Mill, NA LLC?
So moved.
Motion, seconded, all in favor, of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Okay, we'll review the decision. Encourages a pedestrian and bicycle-friendly environment. People be biking to get their haircuts.
I may.
There you go, okay? Condition is met.
Paragraph 42, should the date be today for the lapsing date?
Yes, so October 1st, 2021.
it's not really This is fitting in a use special permit into a definitive master plan phasing, so a lot of these have carried forward from the permit that they're modifying, but it should say 21, no question. But as soon as they get they would have to wait 2 years to bring this barber shop in for it to be expired. You know what I mean? If they don't bring the barber shop in with 2 years, I guess this use would go away.
Do we need that?
I don't really think so.
I mean, it seems like if it's a use,
Yeah.
it's a use, right?
I would strike it. I mean, you're okay with this use in this project, then
I can't.
The
I
use
can't-
won't expire.
I can't see how that would change over time, yes.
I agree, but
Acceptability of this
Yeah.
use.
All right, so
I
let's
think you can strike that whole
strike
condition.
number 42. All right, that's cut, chopped, snipped. What on the barber shop record?
I got it, just didn't think it was funny.
Wow, that hurts. Okay, can we get a motion to approve the Sub-District A definitive master plan special permit modification?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You're welcome. So is Restoration looking to go over there?
They are. They're gonna go into the Bella Ballerina space, and Bella Ballerina moved around to the back, which is a better space for her.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's very excited.
At least according to the internet, he's a very wanted commodity for haircuts.
We've heard that from a lot of people.
Nice.
Yeah.
3 weeks to
Yeah.
get into restoration barber. Like, yeah, that's why I cut my kid's hair with a razor. It's much quicker. Sorry to the barber shops. Okay, for High Street RCG West Mill NA LLC, application for definitive subdivision. Is that where we're at now?
The applicant today submitted a definitive subdivision extension form, extending your timeline to approve or disapprove till December 17th, 2019. It was due to expire October 15th, and so if you would like to accept that, I would just recommend you motion to accept the extension request.
Motion to accept the extension.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is there anything to discuss tonight?
I can just give you an update. We did meet with DPW and the peer review consultant last week to discuss moving the driveway to align with the East Mill driveway. And I think everyone's in agreement that that makes sense because a lot of the traffic that's pulling out of the West Mill is turning right and going towards Main Street as opposed to going up Prescott Street. So it makes sense from a sightline perspective to have it that way. DPW asked our engineers at Ty and Bond to also look at potential redesign options for the Prescott Street intersection, the Prescott and High Street intersection. So our engineers are looking at that, and then they're also looking at combining the changes on the Avalon plans into the subdivision plans. So we didn't want to present anything to you tonight that was schematic. We'd like to have something that's vetted and ideally something that can go to your peer review consultant prior to us coming back here, unless you want to see it before then. So we may not be ready by the 15th. It's just because we're just trying to get everything in order, and so that you guys, when it comes back before you, you're ready to vote on it. If there's anything that you guys think that you definitely want to see, then you should just let us know, and we can make sure we get that. Otherwise, we'll just work on the engineering.
Any idea what they're thinking for that? I mean, are they in a rotary or?
Not a rotary, because I think that there's been really disdain for rotaries, except for me, who I think would be interesting
I
there. No.
generally
And the
don't
traffic
like-
engineer thinks they're great.
You like or don't like?
I like them. Me too.
It's a very efficient.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
So I don't like rotaries when they're there for no reason. There's one by my mother-in-law's house that I hate because you should just be able to drive straight. But in an area like this where you're really, you know there's gonna be traffic, and it's gonna be kind of peak times of the day, and you really wanna like control it in a way without having the lights. If you
That's the
could
thing
do
is,
it,
it doesn't warrant light.
it's not big, right,
It
doesn't
actually
warrant
doesn't
lighting.
warrant a stop sign.
It doesn't.
And so, and I think the rotary, there's not enough space for the rotary.
Correct.
So I think that
Oh,
that's,
it's
so
small.
just
You'd
to alleviate any fears. Yeah, it would not. So I think it'd be more teeing off the intersection, but that island
Okay.
there kind of creates some issues. So they're trying to be sensitive to that and see if we can work something out. But in the meantime, it seems like we hashed out a lot of issues while we were all at the table together, and I think that the design consultants have the engineers have some good feedback, so.
So I think the more you can come back with having hashed out, the
Okay,
better.
and that's my intention, so I just don't know that we'll be there on the 15th, but
Let's
the
continue.
thought with this meeting, this extension was to get you to the end of December, and I think we should be there on the subdivision road by then, so.
Sort of a couple quick questions on this. It's going to remain a private road, it's not going to become a
That's
public
correct.
way. Okay. Is it going to pretty much look like a road, or is it going to be, I mean, are you going to set it up so that it is distinct from everything else around, that it really looks like a road as opposed to a driveway?
Yes, so it'll
Okay.
function better than it does now, because right now it functions more as if it's a driveway. And I think that that's where we're hearing some concerns from the Sutton Pond Condominium Association that it's not really delineated. So but on the flip side, it also will have that loading dock still, and we're trying to work out the truck turning radius right now for the loading dock. It'll have a sidewalk, it'll have landscaping and trees, just similar to a roadway would have. It'll be striped, similar to a roadway.
Okay. I just happened to have got back from visiting with my son who lives in Nashville, and you see that in a lot of the new, malls, which I think are overkill for cars, but usually the main drag through it is set up as, even though it's an interior thing, it's set up clearly as a roadway with all the things of a roadway. I think it's important to do it that way here, as opposed to just being a big driveway.
And that's the intention. And I should also say that we did meet with the trustees of the Sutton Pond Condominium to just have that conversation with them about the easement and how this would take that easement. And we listened to some of the feedback that they had on the roadway as well, so.
Okay, fantastic. So why don't we continue this to October 15th? If it's not ready, then we'll
Okay.
continue it out again.
Great,
Um,
thank
great.
you.
So we also have 4 High Street Avalon Bay Communities, Inc. There's a request for continuance until October 15th. So can we get a motion to continue that until October 15th?
Motion to continue for High Street, Avalon Bay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have a motion from the trustees to continue until October 15th. What's going on? Any idea what's going on with that?
I have not heard between.
Okay. Intrigue. Can we get a motion to continue until October 15th?
Motion to continue.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
1600 Osgood. Holy crap. 8:20.
Moving right along.
Yes. What a night. All right, 1600 Osgood. Going once. Going no. Meeting to it. Motion to adjourn.
While they're coming, we're talking about accessory use. My son was telling me the big thing in Nashville now is they're trying to ban home music studios because it's the opposite problem. They say the business is running in houses. And it's like people are saying, this is crazy, the whole economy in Nashville is based on home music studios. Why are you
Interesting.
doing this?
Interesting.
This is actually kind of an interesting twist on things. Yeah.
8:20. Look at this.
It's like the earliest time we've been on here
I know.
forever. If I may, I just wanted to take out these PowerPoints.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you.
Amazing, my eyesight's so bad, I can still read these things.
All right, 1600 Osgood. 1600 Osgood Street LLC, application for planning board approval of pros 1-lot preliminary subdivision plan. 1600 Osgood Street LLC, application for site plan review and parking special permits. 1600 Osgood Hillwood Enterprises LP, application for site plan review, parking, building height, and floor area ratio, special permits. 1600 Osgood Street LLC, application for large-scale ground-mounted solar energy system site plan review and setback modification special permit. Continue the hearings.
Great.
Hello.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, other members of the board. John Smolak, attorney for the applicant. With me this evening are Gary Frederick, Senior VP Margaret Leader for the Northeast for Hillwood. Also with us is Sean O'Brien, Vice President for Development with Hillwood. Nate Kirshner, Senior Project Manager with Langen Engineering. And Dan Larry, the renewable energy consultant, solar energy consultant for both the applicant and the owner, 1600 Osgood Street, as well as agent for Osgood Solar. This evening, we plan to cover two topics which aren't significant topics, but I think would bear some discussion. First, Nate Kirshner, our project engineer, will run through the utility program for the site. As a result of the redevelopment, a lot of the utilities are going to be cut and capped, and new utilities are going to be designed and laid out. And so Nate is going to just describe what is happening on the site as part of the redevelopment program. And then secondly, Dan Larry will run you through the details of the proposed solar relocation. You've already heard a lot about the solar in terms of the basics, in terms of the relocation of most of the solar onto the proposed Lot C. And Dan is going to just run through some of the changes, some of the more specific details of the solar, not to get into the real significant details of the proposal, but just to give you the highlight of what is being proposed. Is the board has reviewed this several years ago, and so there are modifications that are occurring as a result of these relocations. So with that said, turn the discussion over to Nate Kirshner.
Aspect, or you want me to handle it?
Oh, sure. We could also discuss briefly where we are in terms of sewer. As you recall from town meeting, and maybe I could just mention that briefly at the beginning. As you may recall from the special town meeting, the town had appropriated up to $7 million for a sewer line installation running from the 1600 Osgood Street frontage southerly down to the intersection of Osgood Street and Sutton Street. And the town has, since that time, applied for MassWorks grant application to fund a portion of the sewer and some potential street or roadway improvements. And MassWorks program probably will have announcements in the next 3 weeks as to where we stand on that end in terms of improvements. So, but that's our, in terms of sewer, the public sewer option is our primary option. As a backup, in the event that that sewer is not constructed in time for our planned opening, which is Q3 2022, then we're planning to use the existing sewer line that extends currently to the GLSD. So just wanted to explain that up front in terms of status. We'll know a lot more probably the next 2-3 weeks as to what improvements are being funded off-site.
Once you get that, you pass that in a few weeks, is it likely you'll come back with the sewer and have like detailed engineering plans and so forth that we would look at for the sewer, or how will that work?
Most likely not. I mean, we've worked with the town to coordinate the MassWorks grant application. There are conceptual plans that have been prepared. And I think similar to what happened with Princeton, I think they had conceptual plans initially, and then once the grant occurred, there was the grant that was awarded. They went back and prepared more detailed engineering plans that were reviewed by the DPW and the like. So that's how I envision the process occurring in this circumstance, should the town be awarded funding. So, okay. So with that said, I'll turn the discussion over to Nate Kirshner.
Certainly. Gene, would you mind switching to slide 10, please? 10, thank you. Yeah, well, most of these are previously discussed, some of the subdivision items, overall site plans, things like that. For the record, Nathan Kirshner, I'm a senior project manager with Langen Engineering. And again, just really, despite the size of the site and the complexities of a lot of aspects of the project, utilities.
Can I just stop you for a second? Just, Gene, on the preliminary subdivision, that's still on the agenda. Did we vote on that already?
Yes.
So should that still be on the agenda? So it shouldn't, right? And has a definitive been submitted?
Not yet. It will
Okay.
be shortly.
All right, so that's actually not on the agenda. We're
That's
not-
correct.
Okay, I just wanted to, you just caught my attention when you said subdivision. So, okay, so we're not actually discussing the preliminary subdivision, so we can actually take that off the agenda because we acted on that last time. Okay, back to you.
Not a problem. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Despite, obviously, there's a significant amount of demo going on the property, there's some new, obviously the new building being constructed. the proposed utility plans are pretty simplistic in nature. Osgood Street has sufficient capacity. We've confirmed, we've had meetings with the various utility companies, National Grid, Columbia Gas, confirmed sufficient capacity within the right-of-way to service the new building, as well as maintain service to the existing building. The utility plans that are part of the site plan application really just break up the utilities so that there's limited crossing of, and no codependence with respect to utility service to each of the buildings. We color-coded the plans, although it's a little hard to see in the blow-up. Water, gas, and electric for what we're referring to as Lot B, or the Amazon building, runs through the proposed Lot D, completely removed from Lot A service. Lot A service, there will be some slight reconfiguration to some of those utilities to ensure, one, power is maintained so that those buildings can continue to operate during construction of the rear parcel. And then, as I said, they'd be separated completely from the Amazon facility. The only piece here that really warrants a little bit additional discussion, and I guess I should back up with water. We have received comments from the fire department really with respect to sprinkler systems, hydrant location, things of that nature. That's all being coordinated. With respect to sewer, which Attorney Smolak mentioned, the current plan would be to maintain, as shown in the application, is to maintain the connections running to the west of the site, or the bottom of the screen as you're looking at it, to GLSD. For, again, maintaining that separation for maintenance and operational needs, there's 2 proposed pump houses shown on the plans. If anybody was looking in detail at the plans, that might be a question. Currently, there's 1 pump station on site. That pump station is actually under the proposed building, so obviously that would be removed. We're working out logistically how service is maintained for Lot A and the Osgood property, but this isn't the first time that's had to be done, where there's a temporary connection provided so that that building remains with a functioning sanitary connection while the 2 pump stations are brought online. The biggest utility piece really is, from a logistical perspective, is the solar component. And before I guess the next 2 slides are really just blow-ups of the proposed utility plans. And as I said, they really just show how we're breaking up and proposing, there's a new fire loop obviously proposed around the Lot A building, and then obviously there's a separate fire loop proposed around the Lot B building. So they're separate independent loops providing fire service and suppression for both buildings. There's given the size obviously of the Amazon facility, there's a water tower that's proposed in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, which will be a necessity for fire protection.
Gene, who reviews these drawings? Is it DPW or just a peer consultant or both?
The fire department has their own peer reviewer.
Okay.
Correct.
The building commissioner will have his own peer review. Civil, it was TEC, and stormwater was Wesley Witten. DPW has not hired somebody.
We have not
yet, right?
received comments from DPW. TEC's comments didn't, I believe they deferred in all comments to the town, to the DPW, and then obviously the private utility companies with respect to utility work.
Okay.
Again, other than solar, I'm happy to answer any questions. It's really not a whole lot to speak about, to be honest with you.
I have to conclude from what you said that there's no tough structural impediments to the utilities, and I take it there's no legal impediments to the utilities either.
And I'm not sure I understand.
Well, you were talking about logistically, the solar is the tough piece, so I take it the rest of it, there's no sort of really tough engineering issues or anything like that.
Correct, yeah. There's multiple connections to the existing building infrastructure, so it's a matter of cutting and capping them in the right places while maintaining service to buildings 20 and 21. So it has to be done right, which we're confident it will be done. But everything's conveniently located, I guess, so that can be done. Like I said, the sewer is the one that, like I said, and obviously the hope is we connect to the new sewer main and through the Mass Works and all of that.
And just to add just a few items in terms of building and fire, as Gene had indicated, there are separate peer review consultants for those items, but about 2 months ago, Amazon's head of architecture, as well as some folks from Langen and Hillwood, actually met with the fire and building folks for about 3 hours to run through some issues preliminarily. And at some point, they may go for a tour of a facility out of state, just to have a chance to have some dialogue with the fire officials and their colleagues, building official colleagues in another state who've gone through this process. And so we envision that that process will continue with the peer review consultants on building and fire. And there will be variances that'll be required, but those will be given at the state level for plumbing, fire, and building code issues. This is a building that's evolving, and it's a pretty modernized forefront type of building that's being developed. But it's not something that Hillwood and Amazon have not done in other states. So they're quite familiar, and they have a very experienced architect, as you heard at the last hearing, who will run through those with the building and fire officials, both at the local level and the state level, with their consultants as well. So that'll be occurring. Before we get into solar, I just want to make sure I mention the owners' representatives that were here too, in terms of Aussie Properties. Alan Keller, Vice President of Commercial Real Estate, is here, as well as the owner's attorneys, Michael Rosen. So, as they are the applicants for the Lot C solar materials. But with that said, I want to turn the discussion over to Dan Larry on solar, if there are no other questions on utilities at this point.
Hi, Dan.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Planning Board, it's great to be back talking about solar.
Is it great to be back?
It is.
You
It
enjoyed
is.
last time.
Yeah. This evening, I just wanted to give a high-level summary of what we're proposing to do. And I think to sort of start that, it's worth just talking about what is the project, what is Osgood Solar. So I'm, again, Dan Leary. I'm the agent for Osgood Solar, which is an entity. Osgood Solar is actually, it's 17,136 solar panels that are over there on the property. And with the support of the planning board, we commissioned it a couple of years ago. We put it into service. And what happens with this solar array is when the sun's shining, it's making electricity, all the power from that plant goes out into the grid through a national grid meter, which is actually in the name of the town of North Andover. And this is a contract that was set up by the former town manager. So what happens is that meter spins backwards. And as that meter's spinning backwards, the town's getting a credit on their electric bill. And the town ends up paying Osgood Solar 85 cents on the dollar for the electricity that gets made through it. So about 80% of the town's power, schools, town hall, fire department, streetlights, is actually offset by credits that come from Osgood Solar. So it's a really neat resource in case maybe some newer members didn't really understand what the project was about, why there's solar panels at Osgood. It's really an awesome thing in town. So the intent, and I sort of bring that up because as part of what we're doing to move it, one of the intents is to minimize downtime. You know, it's just a logistic project to pick up the panels and move them, but to do it in a way that minimizes downtime so it's not lost revenue for the town and for the project. Jean, if you could please go to the slide that starts with the solar summary. There it is. The next slide, please. Oh, good, thanks. So again, we're going to be relocating about 80% of the panels that are down there at the site. Some of them are on the roof. Most of it's on the ground already. And the remaining 20% are on a building that doesn't have to go anywhere because that's going to be retained by Aussie Properties. But this is a relocation project. It's for an existing facility that already has an existing interconnection. It's going to happen, it needs to happen in order for the rest of the project to happen. In order to do any demolition of the buildings, in order to start to stage, the solar panels have to move. So as we looked at how we're going to relocate the solar panels, the first thing that kind of sticks out is we wanted to minimize the environmental impact. And as we move them to Lot C, putting them and using as much asphalt as possible is important. We'll show pictures of this in some later slides, but most of the modules are very low to the ground. They're about 14 inches off the ground, and they're designed to be put on a roof or right on asphalt. So we want to use as much asphalt as we can, so we're not putting modules into Greenlands. The next is the the solar array that's going to be located into the fields area on Lot C, it's going to be a new rack system. So you haven't seen that before. And I have some photos to describe what that looks like. There's going to be plenty of screening. It's a large site, but I think we've shown some renderings last meeting of the areas around the north entrance. So anybody driving Route 125 really will have a hard time seeing this because of all the screening that's planned for there. And the layout itself, it's really driven by two primary factors. The first factor is the wetlands. It's a complicated geometry given the wetlands that are there. And the second driver for it is access for first responders. So we have worked with the fire department and working with them to make sure that first responders have access to the site as required by electric code and the state fire marshal's office. The array itself again, we'll show you pictures, but it's secured by a 7-foot chain link fence. It's a secure area. There's signs all around it. No unauthorized personnel can get in. It's locked, and the people that have the keys to it are the fire department, who will have a lockbox on it, as well as maintenance personnel. And again, the intent with this is to minimize downtime. So a lot of the logistics involves a phased approach. We have to work with National Grid because they have to, as we sort of decommission a 50 megawatt substation that existed there for the Western Electric plant when they built it, Lucent Technologies, that's going to get decommissioned and things are going to move around. So there's a couple of steps that happen. I'll talk about those in a second. But again, the overall intent is to minimize downtime. So if we could do the next slide, please. Were any questions so far? This slide just shows the current configuration that's there. There's solar on a couple of rooftops. Again, those are done by right under the bylaws. They were permitted, so we didn't do anything with the planning board a couple years ago on those. But the ground mount systems are shown there on the bottom and the northern side of the property. And you can see the substation off to the north, the meter, and the PCC stands for point of common coupling. That's where it interconnects into the grid. That's where the town's electric meter is. Do the next slide, please. And in the phase one, and this is hopefully this is going to be happening next summertime, next spring, hopefully, we'll be picking up the ground-mounted arrays and literally just moving them up to the north parcel, to Lot C. And they will be reconnecting into the existing substation. It's not really that germane to this discussion, but it is to the National Grid and the phasing aspects of the project. And in the next slide, what ultimately happens is the substation goes away. I think it becomes a retainage drainage basin for the property, and it's all reconnected up there in Lot C. On the next slide, we have some images. So these are the renderings you've seen last planning board meeting of the north entrance. So as you're driving up Route 125, you could turn into the new plant at this roadway. That's what you'll see there, a lot of screening and a chain link fence and the modules behind it. And I believe on the next slide, we show images of what a pile-driven racking looks like. So this is what would be immediately on that corner. So these are racks that are ultimately about 10 feet tall. They're panelized, so they're on driven piles, and distribution equipment is sort of mounted to the back. That's what's in that bottom left-hand corner of it. Those are the inverters that convert the DC power to AC electricity. And you can see it's just a big bunch of solar panels with a fence around it. There's vegetation growing underneath it, so that's what's unique about this. The reason why we have to put the panels this high and sort of stack them this way is so that the vegetation can be mowed. If we tried to put them any lower to the ground or have them spaced any differently, you wouldn't be able to get a mower through, and then vegetation actually literally grows over the top of it, and they don't make power. So it's very important in order to keep the infiltration into the ground, permeability of the soil, to let the vegetation grow and keep that healthy. So that's part of the maintenance of the site.
So, just a question, sort of related, partly related to how you lay everything out inside, but partly related to the screening. You know, at some point, if you put too much screening in, it may impact, you know, the sun and so forth. How do you do that? Like, what type of screening are you going to have? How high will it go? What happens if it gets higher? I'm just trying to get a sense of.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's a great question. If the shade grows up in front of it, it's going to be a big problem. So what's been planned, so first of all, where the elevation of the solar field is actually about 4 feet below the entrance. So we say it's 10 feet tall, but it's actually 6 feet below the driveway entrance, approximately. The vegetation that's been planned there, based on the landscaping plan, shows anywhere from 4 to 10 foot trees that stay, the species that stay that height. So we would not be planting any trees that get higher than 10 feet in those areas, especially to the east along Route 125, because that'd be morning shade. So if they do start to get taller, you know, they'd be trimmed to prevent shading.
Are they going to be more like evergreen or deciduous trees, or what?
There's a schedule that.
It's a combination of both deciduous and
Yeah.
evergreen trees, which I think we talked a little bit about 2 weeks ago. But ultimately, it's a blend of the two. And as Dan said, our landscape architect worked with Dan to ensure offset from the fence lines and things like that nature to ensure that we weren't dealing with, you know, we weren't adversely affecting.
I mean, I bring it up a little bit because the screening is always a little bit of a give and a take, and I get it, it's not a perfect science, and, you know, we'll need probably some flexibility once you constructed it to say maybe a few more here or a few more there, or it may turn out where you originally put them was not the smart place to put them for any number of reasons, so we probably need to revisit that at some point, I would think.
Yeah, I absolutely. What's been planned, I don't see any issues at all. There's no white pines being planted on the south side of it that would grow up in 10
Yeah.
years and cause a big problem. Yeah,
Okay.
this should be fine.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. On the next slide, this is actually a picture of what's out on the western side of the property right now. This is what the ground mount is. So wherever we have asphalt, which is shown up there in the top left corner, this is what's going to be put down on the ground. It's the panels are so low, the equipment's actually tall. The inverters are those boxes that are shown in there scattered around. And then that panel you see right there is a sub-panel. There's probably going to be 5 of them out across the whole ground, so it's not a whole lot of equipment that's going to be mixed in with it. And that's essentially what it looks like. That's a 7-foot fence, which is a code-required fence, and signage to keep unintended visitors away. Any questions on that?
Physically moving them to the new location.
Physically moving that to the
Yep.
new location, yeah. In this last slide is one of the components, is part of the phasing of this. We initially will need to bring the power from from Lot C back into the existing substation. And in order to do that, well, there's 2 ways of doing it. You can bury it or you can put it overhead. Now, this is 23,000 kV lines, so there's very specific requirements about how you can run that line. This is going to be for a period of 9 to 12 months, I think conservatively, and I think it can even be shorter than that. But the request would be, while we're in this interim operating period, rather than putting this 23,000 kV line running at about 200 feet underground in concrete encasement, only to have it dug up 9 months later or 6 months later, whatever it is, that it would make more sense to be able to run it overhead with a couple of poles. And what I drew in there in red is a depiction of approximately what it looked like. This is over by the on the very back of the property by the doggy daycare. If you've ever been to that side of the property. It's, I don't even know that it's visible by the road. But this would be one of the things that, I think the bylaw does talk about lines being buried, utility lines being buried, but this would be an exception or a waiver we'd ask for this sort of interim period while we swap the interconnection points of the project. So we just bring that up to put that out there, but I believe,
Right?
I'm
The
sorry?
previous decision, when these were first located, had that same,
yes,
Request.
I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. So the 3 poles that you see right there were put in, they're owned by National Grid. So they do have that waiver associated with them. Thanks, Gene.
okay?
And that is essentially the conclusion of the high-level summary. It was a lot shorter than it was 2 years ago. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I had a question for Attorney Smolak. So I wanted to see, where are we on, you had kind of a sketch of a timeline?
Yeah,
for it.
yeah.
So I wanted to see where we were and what we had coming up.
Yeah. Well, at the last hearing, we were originally toying with the idea of discussing traffic and stormwater at this meeting, but we needed some additional time to have some further discussions with Mass DOT and the like. So that discussion in terms of stormwater and traffic will occur at the next hearing.
Okay.
That's, I'd like to schedule. And then beyond that, we still have, the last item that we have to present is most likely signage and any cleanup that we might have
Okay.
with respect to those items. And we'll also be filing a definitive subdivision application as well. So, but that definitive subdivision hearing probably won't be until a November hearing date. Probably November 19th, I think, is the board's hearing for that. And peer review is moving along very smoothly. Thus far, stormwater has been working out pretty well in terms of discussions with the peer review consultants. I think Gene was on one of these calls. And so, you know, we think we're progressing pretty well on that end.
Okay.
And
Gene, anything on your end?
we've had 2 hearings with the commission. I wasn't at the last hearing, but in terms of how it has been transpiring, I think it's been transpiring pretty well in terms of the process. So you know, I don't want to handicap it, but I think that in terms of conservation, probably will be wrapped up before planning board is wrapped up, but that's our goal anyway. And obviously you need to be assured that the conservation issues or the material issues are resolved prior to the board acting on these items as well,
Fantastic.
so.
Anything, anybody here? Public? Great. October 15th?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Continue to October 15th. Thank you once again. All right, I think, can we get, let's see, get a motion to approve, if everyone can look at the minutes from September 3rd?
So they are in the packet. In Word version. You don't see it? Yeah,
Not see them on the online agenda.
I did not see it in the agenda.
through the link of the agenda?
What's that?
Through the link from the agenda, going in that way? Is that what you mean?
Minutes, it's at the top of the folder.
Do you mean they're not listed on the agenda at all?
They're not listed on the
Okay,
agenda.
so that's a different issue. Okay. I verified that there's a link.
I was just looking at the agenda.
Okay.
It's
Right,
not-
so they're not on the agenda, but they are in the pack. Okay. Well, people have time to look at them now, or you want to wait till next?
I'm all set.
Okay. I'm just gonna look at it quickly now.
How do I get to the link in the packet other than
I-
from the agenda?
From the planning board website.
Oh,
You go to the planning board website, meeting agenda.
No, Peter, I know what you're saying. I'm bringing it up from the upcoming meetings tab, and it's not on that agenda. We store everything in a different drive, and then we carry it over.
Okay. Everyone good? So reading.
Good.
John, good? Get a motion to approve the minutes from September 3rd?
I will make a motion to approve the minutes from September 3rd.
We got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we got a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.